Let's get started. Welcome to my talk, Hacking for the Greater Good, or How I Hacked My Local Bus System for the Greater Good. I want to start this conversation about how to hack for the greater good by asking all of you in the room right now, who's considered himself as a hacker? I don't see many hands there, like a few, but not everybody's raising their hands. I want to change that, and I want to give you the feeling, or I want to make you think about what you consider as a hacker, and if you can be a hacker. So movies and TV taught us basically that a hacker is someone that gains unauthorized access to some kind of system he shouldn't have access to. But I think that's lame. That's like Hollywood, TV, movie that's going to teach you that. I actually think that Hollywood has better examples for that. That is a way better example of actually how a hack could look like. You work in the middle of the night. These are Red Bulls, badly seen on the screen, but you work in the middle of the night, you're solving actual problems, and if we look up what the definition of the hacker is in Google, we see that it's only someone solving a problem, right? So this guy could also be a hacker, because he's doing a life hack of actually detecting if you fall. So my name's Florian Harr, and I'm an iOS mobile developer at Cabbage in Atlanta, Georgia. I was fed up with my local bus system and the app they were producing about a year or 1.5 years ago, and I was doing something against it. And since then, I feel like I've been hacking for the greater good, and I want you guys to consider doing the same thing. Today, we're going to talk about 4 different things. The first thing we're going to talk about is collecting data. We're going to talk about what is the basic fundament to do a hack for the greater good. The next thing is I'm going to talk about how I built ExpressTracker, how I built the tracker for my local bus system, and how I use the underlying collecting data to actually do this, what I want to build an app that would help everybody. But hacking or coding is really only 10% of all the work that I was doing. Most of the work I was doing in troubleshooting social interactions in real life. It's very easy to bring down code to your MacBook or code down to Xcode, but it's very hard to actually do all the kinds of things around it, from legal up to using third-party APIs and getting consent for those. And the last part we're going to talk about is taking action. What can you do yourself to get a front? What can you do yourself to hack for the greater good? So the first part we want to talk about is collecting data. We've established what makes a hacker, but most companies and mostly everything these days starts with data. So this is not a new thing. Google has been doing this ever since. They've been always collecting data, and every one of their products relies on data. But there are many other examples. For example, Bitvoid did tracking all the eBay data to establish a price line, to establish a baseline for a price for a product. Or Camel that tracks Amazon prices over time. Or one of the most prominent features, Netflix. They were choosing actors and they were choosing their next TV series, their next production, based on data. Or the picture I took while I was walking over here, people waiting on the bus, and as we can see, this is clearly Norway. People are standing far apart from each other. So I was doing the same thing, not standing as far apart from each other, but I live 40 miles outside of the city of Atlanta, so I have a 40-mile travel, which is about an hour and a half if you take the car to work. I was standing at a bus stop, very, very frustrated, 30, 34, 35 minutes, and I thought, what could I do to actually improve my situation? And I saw many other people being as frustrated as I am. So what did I do? I started tweeting very angrily at ExpressTA, at the bus provider here. I was trying to get out how they were having data. I was trying to figure out where their data was coming from and how they were managed internally, because that was the first part for me. The first part for me was trying to figure out how I could improve the situation, but also how they were structured, how they were organized. I needed to understand the system before I could solve it, right? After a few of those tweets over time, and this is already half a year in of complaining on Twitter, right? So at this point, I already lost half my followers because everybody was just like, I'm not interested in this guy ranting about his bus system. I received an invite to their beta system that was basically a glorified HTML page that would show you the live GPS data of the buses. And I was looking into it and found that they have a real API with longitude and latitude. And I was making my own HTTP client out of that, and I started talking to people on the bus, which was interesting, because I was the only one that was arriving 2 or 3 minutes ahead of time at the bus stop, while everybody else was already waiting there for 20 plus minutes. And they were very angry at one point and were like, how the fuck, Florian? How does it happen that you only like wait 2 minutes here until the bus comes while I wait here 20 minutes? I'm like, well, I got this API data source and I actually know where the bus is and kind of that. And they were looking at me with these big eyeballs and were like, can I get access to that too? I was like, I can share that link with you and you can like put the longitude and latitude yourself into Google Maps, but I'm not really interested in like doing this more convenient way for you. Then you have all these kinds of different kinds of personalities that are standing around there. Most people are like, that's like hard work. I guess I'm gonna stand here 20 minutes. And you don't want to do that. So it was funny. That's when the idea arose to actually create an app. But suddenly something changed. At this point, ExpressTA was claiming they were not giving any kind of like updates on Twitter, because that's an unsupported platform for them. But suddenly they were starting to give updates on Twitter. So it must have been that my complaining and other people's complaining started to change their behavior. So here I was and thinking of like how could I give a better idea of what the data comes from and to get a better idea of what I wanted to do. So in hindsight, it looked like this. If we look at the graph, what I did, and thinking in hindsight of it, I was wondering what problems actually do I want to solve. It was a specific what, not a how. I wanted to solve the problems of delay and having a better prediction. The other problem or the other thing I was wondering about is like, what kinds of dependencies do I have? The first thing that came into my mind was like, I don't own the API and like nobody really told me about it, so what are my third-party dependencies? And is there a manual flow available? In my case, there were schedules, but I just told you I've been waiting 20 minutes, so how good is a schedule that's 20 minutes behind? Then the other question I was asking myself is like, are there competitor apps available? You're going to come to this in a moment. There are competitor apps available, but I had to like scope out what's available at this point already. How will I market my app? That was the better question. Like, if I'm going to really release an app or if I'm going to really solve a few of these problems, will I be able to say that I'm going to be the ExpressGA app and I'm going to be the main app? What am I going to do actually in terms of public concern? Like, this is a public matter. After all, they're state funded. We're going to talk about this in a second as well. But what will I do in this matter? And then how do I define success? I mean, after I was up for spending probably 100 or 150, 200 hours to build an app and actually go through all this hassle. So who profits and what will be my success? I knew my success will be that I no longer wait at the bus stop, but is this really like worth my time? Or am I going to be egoistic and like just think about myself and use the API that I already had, or am I going to solve something for the greater good? And the answer was clear for me. I never wanted to wait any more than 5 or 10 minutes at a time. And that's when my app concept was basically done. So how did I build ExpressTracker? To understand the idea of why I needed to build an extra app or why I couldn't use any of the existing apps, we have to talk about the ExpressGA bus system for a minute. So the ExpressGA bus system over Atlanta, or over most of Georgia, is really 166 buses. It's 27 routes, 27 park and ride counties in 12 counties, 40 counties served, and 1.8 million riders. Now the greater Atlanta area has about 7 million people. So 1.8 million riders per year equals in a very, very low amount of people that actually use it. But if we look at the amount of funding that they get, is 17 million in federal and state funds. This is nuts, guys. For the same amount of riders, if any of the metropolitan rapid transport system in Europe would get that amount of funding for the same amount of riders, they could do everything, like literally. This would be splurging in money. So seeing that amount of money, that it's actually tax money, and that they had like zero accountability for delays, because every time I was complaining about this, they was like, oh, we don't know. Guess something went wrong? I'm like, yeah, I know, like, I guessed that for 20 minutes. I needed to do something. So looking at the competition, what was I up for? There was this app from 2016 that was buried until 2017 in the App Store. It's still grandfathered in. That was badly rated. As the rating show, and as you can see, that's the screen on an iPhone 10, makes you mildly infuriated. So my competition was a badly done hybrid app. Like, it was really bad, guys. This is a live view on the right-hand side. Like, the amount of time it takes to load this thing and to get where the GPS is, you're just gonna like make peace with your fate, and you're gonna stand there until you're gonna die. So it was badly done. The other problem that I had is, we're gonna see that in a second, there are several stops where they stop near like accessibility centers or centers for people with disabilities. There is literally no accessibility here. Like, these people would call in, and we're gonna see that in a second. This app has no value for them at all. This app has no value for anyone, in my opinion. It's very inaccurate. The fun part about all of this is, you would think that you just saw like a prediction for 6 minutes. So the average walk for any of the riders to the bus stop is between 5 and 8 minutes. The bus would only show up at the first stop. There would be only 5 stops in downtown, making it, if the bus would be 45 minutes away, it would still show you 6 minutes, because they have a threshold of 6 minutes and trying to be accurate by faking data. So you literally, like, this data is not of worth for anyone. And that's only because they have a threshold put in there. Anything over 6 minutes will be 6 minutes. An hour will be 6 minutes. 600 minutes will be 6 minutes. That is a waste of everybody's energy and resources, and like, that's even a bigger energy waste than I've ever seen anywhere else. There's no notifications. The notifications are really useless. Like, they claim to have notifications, but then you see that they couldn't register your UDID on the call, and you're like, nice, take that feature out, please. It's too complicated from the first touch to the target. We've seen that. So what other competition was there? I was able to use Google Transit, kinda, but they were using the GTFS data stream, a public API that ExpressTA was providing, but that was all based on the schedule, and we've just talked about the schedule. Then there was the Transit app, which is a really nice app, built to support built to support any public transport system that is actually built on GTFS in open data, or an open data format, to show a schedule and stuff like that. And there would be GTFS real-time, which would show you like real-time information. But then again, GTFS real-time has to be controlled by the provider that is actually like giving you the transport that provides you the transport. And ExpressTA wasn't doing that. In addition to that, the provider would still be in charge of like setting up any kind of delay. So they would be telling you when you have a 5-minute delay. And we've talked about the 6-minute threshold. I'm pretty sure if they would support GTFS in the future, it would be 6 minutes all over the place. So Transit has another thing called Go, where riders can support each other by clicking Go. It would track your GPS location and give other people the ability to track where you are, or to track the ability where the bus is. That's a nice feature, but we are really an edge case here. And the fun part about this is, like, most of the big cities in the United States are edge case cities in this case, because you usually have only a few stops. So I asked myself the 3 questions to determine scope and action that we've talked about. The first question for me was like, what problem do I want to solve? The second, how will I market my app? And the third is, how will I define success? I was putting the 3 competitors that I had over a grid that was basically showing accessibility, usability, and real-time tracking. Those were the 2 features that I wanted to solve. I knew that really well because I needed real-time tracking to actually predict times. I needed real-time tracking to see more than 6 minutes ahead of time, or actually see more than 6 minutes at all. And I needed accessibility, usability, because the app that I have an iPhone 10. I spent $1,000 to see all of the screen, not just like the black box part of the app. So putting it over the grid, it was clear for me that there was no accessibility or usability for the My Express app, but it had real-time tracking, so that was nice. The others had accessibility and usability, but no real-time tracking. I don't want to use 2 apps, so I knew I wanted to be in this sector, and I wanted to build my Express Tracker app here. So I was starting out with a geographical survey and actually looking what most of the routes looked like. This is my route in my case, and I was looking at like where the stops are and where people are coming from. I knew from the other end, where I would end up in the evening, that most of the people that I talked to that were on the bus, and those were roughly about 50 to 60 people on one bus, would come from a 5 to 8 mile distance, which is about 10 to 12 minutes of drive. So there are two stops here and here, and then the bus would go straight to Civic Center MARTA station. On a side note, MARTA is the local rail system in Atlanta, and then take 5 more stops up here that would take about 10 minutes. We're going to see that in a second. So I knew that end was pretty simple because everybody was driving with their cars to a bus stop or to a bus and park and ride and was coming from that point. So they needed a window of 10, 12 minutes ahead, and that was only really necessary if the bus was really badly delayed, more than 10 minutes, because then they could stay at home and have another cup of coffee. On the other hand, I was looking at where the bus stops are. So there's 5 bus stops around this route, and this is also why we are pretty much an edge case, even though we are a very popular case in the US, because a lot of bus systems operate that way. A lot of bus systems, you have only a few stops at the end, then you go straight to your target destination, and then you have a few stops here. Now I was talking to people as a developer. I'm not a very social person usually, but I started talking to people and be like, so like, where do you work? Like, how do you get to the bus, and how long does it take you? And I found out that most of the riders were actually coming from either AT&T, from my company Cabbage, from NCR, which is they just built their headquarters there, and a lot of people were basically like putting 60% of the bus in there, or 60% of the bus were workers from NCR, and then we had like a lot of people from the MARTA Art Center station. Why is this interesting? Why is this the number one data source for me? 2 things. First, we have the Center for the Visually Impaired here. So I've been talking about accessibility, and we're going to come to that in a second. The other thing is we have like 2 stops at rail stations here. So this would serve everybody coming from a greater north area. So if you would have to go in the same direction where I would have to go, and you were at a building site, or you were like working up in Buckhead, like which is further north, you would take the train up here and then get on the bus. Why is this specifically important here is we have a lot of like Spanish speakers and we have a lot of like non-English speakers. So the option to call in and ask where the bus is was most of the time not an issue for them, or was not a possibility for them. And the other part was like I don't need it, or I couldn't be too language agnostic for that. Then the other thing is we talked about the Center for the Visually Impaired. What do you do if you can't physically access the information? Because we've been talking about this badly done hybrid app. It just wouldn't give you the information, and after all, it's a map, so this is hard to access. They would call in, but after you call in, you have 3 minutes of audio recording before you even get to a person, and then this person would put you into a waiting line for about 4 to 5 minutes to find out where the bus is, and then they would give you the information. That sounds very tedious to me, and I wanted to change that. The other part about all of that is like looking at your data. We've just talked about collecting data. I've been collecting data for weeks. I've been visualizing the data. I've been putting them in through an API into my app, and I was looking at what's happening. So the further I was looking is that like there's always this part where like a lot of buses end up, even though they shouldn't be there because they're not en route anymore. And then suddenly these buses would actually like have to ride down here, and they would end up here again. And then they were disappearing in the Bermuda Triangle. So what was I figuring out at this point? Like, I didn't know what I was looking at. I drove around this area. I asked bus drivers. I tried to figure out what's happening. And I couldn't find what's really going on. It turns out like their bus depot where they store all their buses, where everybody's going in the morning and in the evening to either go from or go to, the bus depot was around here. So all the buses from all over Georgia were driving to this position and then like either being done for the day or driving out again. Why is this important? Because even though if I couldn't rely on a third-party data source at the end of the day, I could rely on that a bus that was taking a trip early in the morning at 5 a.m. and was coming in too late at this point, it would come out, and it would definitely come out too late out here, and I could already calculate a delay of like 5-10 minutes onto the route. So even though if I couldn't rely on the third-party data source that I was using, I could potentially track that on a server, create a new API, and get it out and have a better prediction of when a bus would be too late than what ExpressTA was giving me. So here's my app, and don't be too underwhelmed. It's not a really, really nice app. It's not an app that I'm going to tell you about a secret how I did this great interface. It's really an app that solves an issue here. So on the left-hand side, we're going to see the usual, like the usual usage pattern. You only really get your local location. You're fetching all the data. In this case, it takes a little bit longer because the hotel Wi-Fi is slow when I did the demo last night. you're receiving all the different buses. You actually have, for the first time, discoverability, where you see all the bus stops on one map. You no longer have to guess where a bus stop would be. And you can actually click on a single bus and see the prediction and see where it's going to stop at. This is, for the first time, a real helpful information compared to the information that we had before. We also see the current traffic if we click on the bus itself, and we would see the route. On the other hand, I wanted to see where the next buses would be coming. There were several lines that were going into the or several routes that were going to the same destination. So again, I wanted to be able to click on a bus stop and see where the buses are going to. So what different routes it was surfing and which different stops I could potentially go from the bus stop to. So again, these are two easy things that I did here. This is no black magic. This is no like real dark or real complicated IIS here. The other thing that I wanted to do is accessibility. I'm going to show you the voiceover demo, and you have to focus on it a little bit because the voiceover is very fast at this point. I just put up the volume or just put up the speed a little bit.
Double tap to open. Express Tracker. Double tap to Express Tracker. In progress. No features visible. Use word to access points of interest. Five Church Atlanta. 400. Coming to downtown. Button. 401. Coming to Parallel. 408. Jones Creek to Chambly. Button. 410. Sugarloaf Mills to Windward Marta Station. 411. Hamilton Mill. Mall of Georgia to Midtown. 413. Hamilton Mill. Mall of Georgia to downtown. Button. 413. 414. Hamilton Mill. Mall of GA Sugarloaf Mills to Mid. Button. Select the route. Selected. 444,005. Piedmont 8ME. One way. Bus 414. Predicted at W Peachtree Street at Civic Center Motor Station. Northbound. On 2018. 10. 31:22 hours. 10 minutes and 0 seconds plus 0000. Shows more info. Use word to access points of interest. Bus 414. Predicted at W Peachtree Street at Civic Center Motor Station. Northbound. On 2018. 10. 31:22 hours. 55 minutes and 0 seconds plus 0000. Shows more info. Use word to access points of interest.
There's one more thing.
Bus 414. Predicted at W Peachtree Street at Civic Center Motor Station. Northbound. On 2018. 10. 31:22 hours. 55 minutes and 0 seconds plus 0000.
I hope that's it, but what you see here is it's a total different accessibility experience here. I've been working with some of the writers from the Center for the Visually Impaired to make this a voiceover experience they could be using. I've had a talk earlier this year about accessibility in IIS, and that opened my eyes about it's very easy to actually display information that you write down in an app, like labels and stuff for accessibility. Well, what do you do with a map? It's all visual, right? So we've been trying to make an experience that they could use too by having a different voiceover experience. If you have voiceover turned on, you go into the app, it would give you at first your menu. You could select your bus route because you most likely already know as a user that needs voiceover which line you wanted, and then it would select the first bus that is nearest to you, that is most likely to actually arrive in time or most likely to arrive the next. It would give you the information with a value actually behind it, when it would be at the next bus stop. And then if you would scroll to the next element, this would be the next element in line. So these are very helpful things for these people. And there are so many stops all over the place. And the fun part about all of this is really, we've been seeing that they have 17 million in funding. But everything that receives funding in the United States, basically state and federal funding, has to support people with disabilities, has to be ADA friendly. They were ADA friendly in terms of seating and stuff like that, but if you can't come onto the bus, what good is a seat that actually is wider? So the second question I was asking myself is, how will I market my app? The first part is distribution. It's going to be easy. We're going to talk about that in a second. Legal, disclaimer, and promotion. Let's start with distribution. It might be easy for you, and you might be thinking yeah, distribution, Florian, you're in the App Store. Just put it on the App Store. But that wasn't as easy. We're going to talk about the legal aspect of that in a second. So I was wondering what it could be the second thing I could be doing before I'm going all in on the App Store. And that was test flight. They were already announcing public test flight links, and I did that too. And it was very helpful. We'll see about this in a second. The other part was the legal aspect. From the first minute I've been wondering is, what if I fail? What if I'm breaking all the laws and lose my visa and going to be poor in Germany, back in Germany? So I was researching what the legal aspects would be for using a third-party API that I don't have any authorization to actually use. And it turns out they actually have the copyright for that. Any given data set and the representation thereof, regardless of the data origin, is a work unto itself. The public representation of the facts, regardless of the means, is a work unto itself. This is a very popular example for the telephone books. You would think that telephone books, for example, are like open data that you could use. That is not the case. like even though you can publicly, or you can't basically go from house to house, ask people about a number and collect the same amount of data, it's a work unto itself, and so therefore the publisher could have like rights on it. This is a very public example because a lot of companies that would need the data, they would usually try, or they would call in for the actual telephone company, try to get a copy of the telephone book, but that wouldn't work out. So they end up like actually paying a lot of money to people that live in the area where they would have to release it for free anyway, and those people would send in the telephone book, and that was a very like common pattern. And this is not different for myself, even though this is state and federal funded. The data set still belongs to like ExpressTA. So the provider legally owns the API and the data. So I was wondering what happens if I'm gonna like do this and gonna fail miserably. I don't want it to have that, so before I even like pushed anything to the App Store, I promoted the benefits for the public. So I went public, talked to people, I showed them my app, and we're gonna talk about the promotion part in a second. Why did I do that? Well, in worst case, I get a cease and desist if I'm gonna go public, and I have to take down the app, which actually happened. But if I went public before, and talk to all these people about how much better my app is than the ExpressTA app, they would potentially complain to ExpressTA, and the public pressure would put them into, well, Florian, it's fine if you use the API. So that's the legal aspect for that. The other part that I was wondering about is the disclaimer. So I was relying on their data. I was putting my name out for the app. So how do I tell people about the data accuracy and where I'm getting it from? And the other part is responsibility and liability. I don't want it to be liable for any of the information I was giving out. At the same moment, I don't want it to blame ExpressTA. You don't want to have like the bad feeling out there that you're blaming someone else. So I had to implement like both a disclaimer that would say both of these things, that I'm not liable for any of the information, and on the other hand, I protect myself that the data accuracy, that the data is only that the predictions are only as good as the data I'm getting. The other part I was wondering about was promotion. What am I going to do about promotion? First thing, promo videos. Like I was putting out promo videos on both YouTube and Vimeo that was showing like the ExpressTA app on one hand showing 6 minutes, and my app showing 45 minutes on the other hand. And this was a very accurate, nice picture because you were like looking at Google Maps as a proof that I'm not faking any of the data on both ends, and then you were like showing this. This was a very nice video that was watched over and over until I had to take it down. Press kit, like I was sending out cold emails to ExpressTA, I was sending out tweets to all these people and trying to get them to actually give me allowance to their API. This helped me a lot to make a lot of contacts. Not with ExpressTA, they never really replied, but with all those people that were already annoyed. There were a ExpressTA writers union that was built around it when the buses started to be late. But the other part is like this cold emails led to relationships that I ended up getting data from, that I ended up getting support from. Talk to strangers. This was a fun part for me. Like I knew from the first minute that this would be the hardest and the most interesting part at the same moment, because I would be sitting on the bus with my MacBook on my lap, like coding this app, and people would be asking, so what do you do? How do you do this? And you would end up explaining all these things. And it was nice in some parts. In other parts, you had to explain the whole system of GPS because people were starting to ask you, like, so you connect to a satellite? I'm like, kind of. But then again, like, it's totally different. And you were, like, trying to explain to them how it works and how you get your predictions from and how you have traffic patterns and not. And that was interesting, but it got me to actually, like, find a lot of my bugs in my app, because I was never thinking of these things until I started to explain it. And the other part is, and that is also like a big part of this talk, is my demo. How did I demo? This is the most important part, like perfect the art of demoing. So what was I doing? I was, too fast again? I was like tweeting again at the CEO, trying to get him to give me access to the API. But we in America, they all like put this, like give this work to another company to be not liable, so they don't all own it themselves, and there's a lot of stuff involved that are, as I was told, I wouldn't understand because it's contract work. I really understood it because they only wanted not to be liable for any of this stuff, and so they put it to someone else. But what was I doing? I put test flight public links. Never elsewhere in my life have I seen that all my user base, everybody that could potentially use my app, would be at the same place. So everybody was at a bus stop, right? Like normally you wonder like, what's the demographic? Where do these people live? Like, how can I target them? For me, this was a clear answer. Like, they were at a bus stop waiting for the bus. What else would they do, right? So I was putting out these flyers of like having trouble catching your bus. Try my app. If you have an iPhone, just scan it. You would get the app, and you would be able to use it. So I came to the last question. How would I define success? Usually I would define success by pay my developer membership, pay server costs, pay my tools. That wasn't really the case for me. I don't want it to have any monetary value attached to this. First, I don't want it to be liable, like I said before. Second, I wanted to do something outside of work. I wanted to do something, I already had food at work, so this was covered. I had sleep at home, like there's a bed there, so what else do you need? Not much, like I got a MacBook, so I was wondering what do I wanted to have, and it was really for me being able to test new technology. In fact, I was always reading Swift by Sandal, and I couldn't use all these techniques in my app, so I wanted to have another app where I could test it. I wanted to do something without dollar value, but some kind of other value. I've said it yesterday at a speakers dinner that like a few years ago this was a hobby and I really liked doing it. Now it's a job and well, sometimes, not always I like it. So I wanted to do something again where I would not be attached or where there wouldn't be strings attached, right? And I don't want it to wait 30 plus minutes in all weather. Now you've seen this not very overwhelming app, and it's really not very overwhelming in terms of architecture. If we look at it, it's a very simple app. We only have a few controllers and logic controllers here. We really only have 5 different models here. We have one data source, a reusable data source. We have endpoints here, a few of them that I'm calling for ExpressTA. And we have like really 3 views. That's it. The fun part here, and I want to emphasize that specifically, is it's simple. It's going to be open source by the start of December. And it's a very simple app that everybody could participate. So what started out as an app to test new technology, now is an app that is going to go open source. It's going to be an example on how real-time data could be displayed on an app. But further than that, like is talking to strangers, I found other designers and I found designers on the bus that would be interested working with me getting my design better. So suddenly what was myself getting my frustration out into something productive ends up being a small community building something, which is very fun. And the most important part for me is I do no longer have to write this unicycle in rain. Like this is the #1 success part for me. I usually ride a unicycle for 40 minutes or so to the bus stop because I hate cars. I hate cars so much that I ride an electric unicycle to that. I no longer have to do that for 40 minutes in the rain or standing then 40 minutes because the bus stops in America are not as nice as they are here. There's no roof and being 40 minutes in rain sucks. So what was the other part? We had like an app, but what now? We knew that coding was only 10% and we knew that like there would be a lot of social interactions. That was really bad. I started all of this in early 2017 and we're just about to release now. So this is almost 2 years. Here was David versus Goliath. Like here I was standing trying to put up with a company that had millions of dollars as resources, that had lawyers and all of these things. I was wondering from the minute one, what if we fail? But I was coming very fast to the decision of if I would do my marketing ahead of time and I would be committing myself to doing this, which I did also like earlier this year when I was like committing to giving this talk, I would have A, to deliver, and B, like I would have pressure and I would have public background to actually get this app out. The legal situation was a hard thing, and I tried to contact lawyers, tried to get them to get in answers, but without putting up a retainer of at least $1,000, you're not getting any research on that. So I was trying to get with the cold emails and the stuff that I showed you to get them to give me acceptance for the API. That wasn't the case. So the only thing that I really could do was push the development, push out already versions for test flight, push out versions to people I knew, and therefore get the public backing. And it seems like that's going to be working. So the other part was like that I've always been asking, so what if we fail? Like, I mean, like, what if I put in 200 hours and they're like, nah, that's not going to happen? Well, you have to pivot. You got a great name and a great team already, so you got to pivot, right? I was telling you about different kinds of data sources, GTFS. I was telling you about like how I could potentially track this on a server, or could track this with other kinds of data. And that was really what I wanted to do. Like if I'm not gonna get the data source, like if I'm not gonna get like a contract to be able to use the data source on all these clients, I could just go ahead, like write a server component, make my own app from the API, because I'm just gonna be a consumer then, and make my own great work on that. And I would not have as accurate information as I had if I would have GPS, but it would be almost, and that was a test example for me, it would be almost 90% accurate. The other part that was really important for me is in this whole social interaction thing is you have a lot of different people, and that's something that I always see people missing out is like who's your target audience? If you ask marketing, they give you a pretty clear example of like, 60% of our people are like small business owners and they have this exact scenario. You're like, yeah, but like what about the other 40%? Yeah, we don't care about that. Like we're gonna talk about it in a year. So I was wondering, like, what kind of demography, what kind of people am I talking with? And I said it before, like, I was talking with people that didn't even know GPS, up to people that were still on an Android phone. And so I was wondering for myself, like, what do I do the best to, like, express them or show them what I have? So for me, it was perfecting the art of, like, demoing your app. I would have my app on its own page. This was very important. Like you had to have your app on its own page so they would actually not see any other apps. They wouldn't be distracted. Then the launch screen for my demo app that I had, for my demo target that I would have in Xcode, I delayed the loading screen by 10 seconds. You never do this in a public or in a productive app, but here it was very important. They needed to see the logo. If you show it to someone for 10 seconds, they might, like some of them might gonna ask, like, does it take that long to load? And you're like, nah. Well, that's maybe in this case. You're not gonna say to them that you're like delaying it for 10 seconds, so you actually do remember your logo. But 10 seconds was the magic number for me that I needed to show the logo so people would remember it and would remember the name and associate the logo to the name. Then I would always show them the same demo, right? Here I was standing. Most of the time I had people that were waiting for a 412 here, or 412 bus here, or 430, because all these buses would come along here, right? So most of the time my demo would happen around here, which would be either this stop or that stop. So that was one of my usage patterns that I knew. I knew that at this point, like people were hoping that the bus would stop here, a unofficial bus stop, or they would decide to walk up here or down here. This was a pattern, a usage pattern the app would not give you, right? So at presenting my mock data here, they would be able to look where the next bus that they are looking for is and could decide if they're going to walk up or down, depending on how far the bus is away and if they're still going to make it here to get a better seating spot, or if they're going to walk up here because they potentially would not reach the bus before it's arriving. So this was very excellent data for them. This was for the first time giving them data they didn't have. And then I would show them, like, if you need a 412, this is the route it's going to passing. And I would pull up the data sheet and show them, well, maybe you don't want to do this. You don't want to walk up or down because you're not going to reach it. So perfecting the art of demo was essential for me because it would give people the opportunity to A, learn about the app, and B, see how they can use it. So much about that. Like, that's what you should be doing, and that's how like troubleshooting social interactions in real life came down for me. The last part is taking action. How can you today take action? I hope by now everybody gets a small idea of like themselves, considering themselves a little bit more as a hacker or considering themselves more what they can do. So what can you do? It's November 1st, so this is going to be done, but like Hacktoberfest in October from DigitalOcean is a really, really nice project to be able to take part in open source development. This is very close to open source development, what I was doing. I was not considering myself doing open source development, but this is a nice thing to actually take part in contributing to a community, to be part of something for the greater good. The other part is like, some people would say we have a like messy political situation in the US. I'm not going to say anything about that, but there's the 5 Calls project, for example. Those are projects that are all over the place, all over the world, basically, where you can take part, help development. There's a really nice app from Ben Shearman, or Ben Shearman took part in that from the guy from the NS Screencast. where they built like a 5 calls app on for iOS. They have a lot of like posts open where you can help and where you can take into action. But most important for me was like you don't have to be a great blogger, a great speaker, or a podcaster to be a great dev. Like every time I started talking to people on the bus, and I ended up meeting an Android developer that will soon like bring out an Android version of this app, I remembered that like a great developer isn't defined by like the output of blog posts or the output of podcasts or anything like that. You can be a great dev without all of these things, as long as you remember it's dangerous to go alone. So take this and have a kind of a gym buddy, do it together, that will keep you both like working towards one goal and will help you getting there. So things that you should plan for as a summary. You should always remember what kind of problems you want to solve. For me, like oftentimes I found data in the data source and I was like, that would be super cool to have. But my problems that I wanted to solve were different ones. So I wanted to solve the delay and the prediction to be better, more accurate, and I really did that. How am I going to market your app? Like this is a very important part. At least the amount of time that you've put into developing your app, you should put into marketing. Otherwise, it's not going to be worth it. There's so many apps out there in the App Store, and there's at least 5 different My Express versions that are all as bad as the one that we've seen. You need to stand out from that. And how are you going to define success? Like, like if you don't set your steps, we've heard this in the talk before from Andrea, you need to define success by like slowly iterating over it and seeing what your successes are, celebrate your successes, and keep moving forward. Otherwise, you're going to lose your patience and you're going to lose your work attitude to go there. But most important for me was like, I've given you this question earlier when I started this talk. If you consider yourself a hacker, I think I'm looking at creators, I'm looking at developers that already have those skills. I'm looking at people that can do something for the greater good and reward themselves and the community to doing that. So I want to encourage you to take action yourself, to take action small. It could be anything from a soccer club up to a church, up to some kind of like conference, right? Like even that. Do something. This is a great thing to reward yourself. This is a great thing to learn, to grow. I hope this was inspiring. If you have any questions, I'm going to be here today, tomorrow, and in a few more days in Oslo. Talk to me. There's a lot of things we can do. Thank you.